was 8 and Ray, their son, was 6 years old. Mikio worked for a company called Interbrand. It's not very clear exactly what role Mikio had within this company. However, they were a large company and they were based in London but had offices in over 20 countries worldwide. To give you a flavour of what Interbrand did as a company, they actually were responsible for coming up with the term Wi-Fi in 1999. So they were a pretty big deal. Mikio's colleagues described him as being ingenious, innovative and friendly, and he was just somebody that got on with everybody and wasn't someone to make enemies, or he was just an easygoing, nice guy. Yasuko, the wife, she was a teacher, and again she was seen as kind and compassionate by everybody who knew her. Their 8-year-old daughter Nina was a very typical young girl. She was in 2nd grade. else was somebody apart from Mikio accessing this email. And 10:38 is the last time that we know that any member of the Miyazawa family was actually alive. At about 10 p.m, so just about half an hour before this email was accessed, somebody walking behind the house along the path in the park heard what they described to have been an argument that sounded as though it was between a couple. So they didn't say specifically what they heard, but they said it sounded as though a couple was just having a bit of a heated argument, nothing too sinister or violent. That's what they thought was happening when they walked by the Miyazawa home. Around an hour and a half later, the family, Yasuko's family next door, heard a loud banging sound, and around the same time, an eyewitness spotted a man looking like he was running down the side of the Miyazawa family home. One piece of information that I want to just add is that at around midnight that same day, a local taxi driver picked up 3 middle-aged men. The men didn't give their names or any clue as to their identities. However, the taxi driver stated that he dropped them off at a nearby station, and that one of the men left a blood stain on the back seat of his taxi. So this is something that the taxi driver came forward with after the details of the crime had emerged. The next morning, so New Year's Eve, Yasuko's mother called next door to try to start making some plans for that evening. As I mentioned, New Year's Eve and the New Year is a big deal, so they would have probably planned to spend it together as a family. However, the phone wouldn't even ring. It appeared that the phone lines had actually been cut. So Yasuko didn't know this at the time, obviously, and she just thought something was amiss with the phone lines and headed next door. She knocked on the door, however there was no answer, and it was eerily silent inside the home. At this point she was concerned and let herself in with a set of her own keys. Upon opening the front door and entering, she reports the house just being deathly silent. She then walks further into the house and finds the body of Mikio, her son-in-law. He is lying lifelessly at the bottom of the stairs, and it is clear that he has been stabbed multiple times. Yasuko's mother then heads upstairs, and on the second floor she finds the bodies of her daughter Yasuko and her granddaughter Nina. Again, they were lying lifelessly at the bottom of their loft ladder leading to the 3rd floor of the house, and it is reported that they had sustained much more severe injuries than Mikio had. Yasuko's mother then made her way further into the house, into the children's bedroom, and she found 6-year-old Ray, who had been strangled to death in his sleep, and police theorized that Ray was probably the first of the family to have died. At this point, Yasuko's mother calls the police. This crime was of an extremely brutal nature, and it shocked the neighbourhood, and it shocked Tokyo police. This isn't something that normally happens in a district like Setagaya. It is regarded as being a very safe place for people to live and for people to raise a family. So the police questioned Yasuko's family, who was next door at the time ladder that leads onto an attic type room. Is just an area that is accessible via this ladder. It's not necessarily an entire third floor, it's just an area with a futon and a TV. And it is likely that Yasuko and her daughter Nina were in this bed watching TV together while 6-year-old Ray was asleep in the children's most of them were attributed to family members. However, there was one set that did not belong to any of the Miyazawas. The police also found shoe prints all around the house. Now this is interesting on 2 points. The first being that the shoe prints were made, they belong to a very specific type of Slazenger training shoe, and the size of the shoe was not a size found in Japan, it was a Korean size. So the shoe itself was a type of shoe that was mainly sold in South Korea. The second point is that it is customary in Japan for people to take their shoes off before they enter someone's home or even their own home. So for this person to keep their shoes on either means that, one, they had complete and utter disregard for any level of respect for the family and the home, which, given everything else, this is probably the case. Yasuko lightly grabbed the family first aid kit in an attempt to bandage up injuries that had been inflicted on her daughter, Nina. It is then believed that the killer found a kitchen knife in the Miyazawa's kitchen and went back upstairs to finally kill Yasuko and Nina. It is then believed that the killer stayed in the family home for a few hours after the killings took place. So it is believed that the killer napped on the family's living room sofa. He basically lived in the victim's home for the night. He helped himself to ice cream from the fridge. The police found 4 popsicle wrappers that had the killer's DNA on them, not the family members. The family computer had also been accessed at around 18 minutes past 1 in the morning after the killings. So interestingly, the killer accessed the family computer. However, all he did on there was browse through the family's recently visited websites and the bookmarked websites. So he visited Mikio's work website and the website of the school that Yasuko taught at. So the killer also attempted to buy tickets to a theatre show. However, the transaction didn't go through, it failed, and he didn't attempt it again. The computer was also accessed again at 5 minutes past 10 the following morning. And after just a few minutes, the computer was unplugged from the wall. So this is really strange because it is difficult for the investigators to figure out why the killer did this. There was seemingly no reason for him to browse the sites that he did, and it is likely that he just wanted to enjoy being in the family home and living as they did of Eastern Asian descent, and the killer's mother was of South European descent, so somewhere like Italy, for example. So the father's side was likely to be either Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. And this is split even further, so the genome found in the killer's blood is present in 1 in every 13 Japanese people, 1 in every 10 Chinese people, and 1 in every 5 Korean people. So given, statistically speaking, he's not on somebody else's in another country. So the last theory that I'm going to go with, and this is the one that was what I was thinking throughout whilst researching, is that it is likely not a contract killing or a murderer per se, a psychopath of any kind, as normally described. Some believe that this is the result of the actions of somebody with some severe mental illness. Now, bear with me here. As I was researching the case, the one name that kept popping up in my head was Richard Chase. I've done a video on him before, but the tortured animals, the mutilated cats in the area, the chaotic and disorganised crime scene and the killings themselves, the overkill of the females again made me think of, and this is the things that were straight away coming to mind when I was reading them, perhaps an issue with this person, the killer's mother, or a hatred of women of some kind. Again, I thought of the Richard Chase case, the overbearing mothers, how that impacts people who are not mentally well. This is the theory that I'm most drawn to. I feel like I can't rule out the fact that it might be a local. It could be someone that is just never come into contact with the system, with the legal system, and therefore is not present on any of the databases. It could be someone that lived locally, but perhaps is kind of under the radar. And the reasons for this is that, again, the tortured animals, the odd behaviours that the killer exhibited whilst in the family home, looking at the saved, the tabbed pages, the favourites of the family, gathering leaflets and the random objects lining up, the family ID and credit cards, and the thing that actually also the feces, the unflushed feces in the family toilet, it just feels very chaotic. I feel like these are the actions of somebody who is not thinking clearly. Everything's sort of happening, and I will say I was thinking of paranoid schizophrenia throughout. Somebody who's having an episode and believes they're in danger, or the family is posing danger, or that was where my thought process was going, but I don't know. So I can see my camera battery is flashing, so I'll hurry and I'll leave this one here.